number 6, which is a presentation by Mr. Hardy. I saw him walk into the room just a few moments ago, and I guess you're going to cover both of these subjects at this time. Is that correct?
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Warren Hardy with the Hardy Consulting Group. Appreciate the opportunity to be here to give you an update on where we are on those two issues, the habitat plan as well as the potential charter change. Let me apologize in advance if I restate something I said at the last meeting. I'm having so many conversations on this, it's hard to remember with whom I'm communicating. So I'm gonna go back from square one so we can make sure that the public has the full comment of where we are. At the last time I was here, we had talked about and sort of made the decision to move forward as a first option with creating our own independent plan, independent of the county, and that was a function of primarily the fact that it became pretty obvious to us that in the very near term, the county plan was going to increase substantially. And contingent, the thing that was the whole thing hinged on was whether or not we needed, some large number of the 78 species that is covered by the county covered in our plan. And we got an indication, at least unofficially, that that's not going to be necessary. So it looked very obvious that creating our own plan was going to be the primary option. I was instructed to move forward with starting those conversations and having that discussion. The initial part of that discussion, of course, was with the county to see the county and the Fish and Wildlife, Department of Fish and Wildlife, to see if they would be open to that kind of an arrangement where we would withdraw from the county plan and create our own plan as a method to have one plan, one fee. Always been our objective, one plan, one fee. I am pleased to report that I have had those conversations with both Fish and Wildlife and the county, and both of them are open and supportive of the concept of us withdrawing. It was not contemplated when we became part of the county plan that we would ever withdraw. So there were some questions and concerns about whether that was logistically structured so that we could do that. But we still have got some questions to answer, but there doesn't seem to be any barriers to that at all at this point. So we're moving forward. That, in my mind, creating our own plan created a couple of other additional questions that had to be dealt with. The first is how we deal with the acreage. Although the plan itself doesn't really speak to a developable acreage, there's active discussions about under the county plan a certain number of acres that are developable under the plan. And my first question was how would withdrawing from the county plan and creating our own plan be impacted? How would that impact the developable acreage we have out here? And it looks like that will be something that will be completely negotiated in our new plan, that they'll be open for those conversations. And we certainly wanted to make sure that was addressed. We don't want to reduce the number of acres that's available. I've expressed that to the county and to Fish and Wildlife as a concern that we have. Both have indicated they don't think that's a major issue at all. The second issue was, obviously we've paid quite a bit of money out of this community into that county plan. And so the other issue was, how do we recoup that money? The county has indicated that they can't just write a refund check because of the way it's structured, but they clearly understand the fact that we need that money back for our plan. And they are developing, working internally. I don't think I'm saying too much to say that they're supportive of finding a way within the parameters of the law to get that money back to us for our plan. And those discussions are ongoing. So that's going very well. The third question that we had was, of course, the preliminary question about when we jumped out or decided to pursue the concept of our own plan, and that was what species would be required. I had a long conversation with Fish and Wildlife about that and asked them to go back, sharpen their pencil, do their due diligence, come back to me and tell me what plan or what species they believed would be required. Of course, the county covered 78 some odd species. It was our indication based on conversations with Clark County. Clark County said, we really believe that it's really only the riparian species that you guys have an impact on. And then, of course, if we withdraw from the county plan, that adds the desert tortoise. But their opinion doesn't matter. Fish and Wildlife is the opinion that matters. And they came back and concurred with that. They said that based on their initial reaction, now, of course, all of this is preliminary. They could come in as we get further down the road, identify another species. But initially, they're identifying the four riparian species that are identified in the Virgin River Plan and the desert tortoise. He says there's a potential that there are two plant species that could be impacted. Not sure if they are, that'll take some further investigation, but even if they are, they're so minimal that it's not gonna have a real financial impact one way or the other to include them in our plan. Then of course, the other issue that's out there is the cost of the plan. I'm operating under some assumptions, some estimates that have been given to me by the county that indicate for including those 4 riparian species and the desert tortoise, that we would be somewhere in the neighborhood of the $500 an acre that's being paid. Now, when I last spoke to Mike Sen, he said, something along the lines that it's fine to go forward with that assumption, but just be mindful that that could change. And I understand that. I mean, I get that depending on what species they may find necessary to come in. And I made him aware that that's fine, but if you need to know that we're moving forward with this, but if we find that it's more cost effective to be in the county plan, we're gonna revisit that too. So I'm giving you a heads up as well, and he appreciated that. But again, the county, the folks that I've spoken to felt very strongly that we would have to add the desert tortoise to even be at the 550. And he's just being extra cautious, and I appreciate that, and I wanted to make you aware of those conversations and be mindful of that. Is there a question?
I do, I have a question. How, and maybe you haven't gotten this far down the road yet, how is Bunkerville impacted by a Virgin River Habitat Plan? Obviously, they're still part of the county. How does that plan play out with them?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. I think we're sort of operating under the assumption right now that they would continue in the county plan. Of course, I think the Bunkerville Irrigation District though would be under this plan. Those are details that have not totally been vetted yet. I have brought that up as a question, and everybody says, let's cross that bridge when we come to it.
It's not like it's a ton of development happening
Right.
over there or anything.
But it's on the list, it's on the agenda of things that we're gonna have to vet. Because the other thing is, we gotta make sure that the Southern Nevada Water Authority is covered for their activities out here as well. So there are issues and questions like that that need to be resolved. The good news is, there hasn't been anything that we've discovered or looked at so far that seems to be insurmountable. To me, the biggest question remains the cost of the plan. But I have served full notice that we're going to do what's most cost effective for our ratepayers and our citizens. And if that means that we, decide not to pursue this single plan and decide to go back to the county, then that's what we're gonna do. And they understand that. They understand that we are going down this path as a first step. But as I said to Mike Sen, we need to decide to do something and start doing it. If we hit a roadblock along the way, then we'll revisit it. And he's with us on that, and he understands that. So that's my report on the habitat plan. Would you like me to take questions on that now, Mr. Chairman, then I'll do the charter change?
No, I think you had a question.
Yeah. I wonder how they come up with their cost. Way back when we were gonna adapt the second plant, and they wanted $500. We said, well, no, we're not gonna pay that. And we said, well, $270. They cut it in half. I mean, that's quite a discount from $500. I mean, I wonder how they come up with those dollar figures.
As I understand it, Mr. Chairman, and I've got a lot of more research to do on that as well, because when I talked to the county, they seemed pretty certain about the dollar figure affixed to each species. But again, they understand our impact. So it's based on, there's an estimate per species based on the mitigation they think is necessary. I tend to believe the Clark County number because they're going to be there, because we're currently in their plan. They're a little bit more familiar with our impact, and a large part of this, let's not forget, in terms of the fee, is going to be the issue of whether we're doing a habitat and conservation and recovery plan.
Right.
And at the very beginning, I indicated that was a Cadillac we couldn't afford. We just can't afford a recovery plan. And although I don't have an official letter from, Fish and Wildlife saying it's fine, you don't have to do a recovery plan, I have verbally communicated with them. They understand that that's more than we can afford out here, and I think they're going to be very willing to work with us on it. So there are a lot of factors that go in. What is the level of mitigation? What is the level of conservation? What is the recovery? I think we're beyond funding a recovery plan. And our current draft, contemplates a recovery. And so we're gonna, I think, have to walk back on that. So there are various factors, but it has to do primarily with the impact that the community's having on the species. And I think we would all agree that we're having very minimal impact. I mean, I think if we were so inclined, we could make the argument that we're having no impact. We're kind of, down that road a little ways too far to turn back at this point. But anyhow, those are the factors that go into it.
Tell them about a price list.
Yeah, give us a quote.
And, I mean, is this something the city's pretty much driving?
Well, the city, that's a great question, because the understanding between between the city and the Fish and Wildlife. And the Fish and Wildlife very much considers this a city issue.
Yeah, and our argument's always been that we're kind of an agent of the city, and that, I think that's a good argument. And I'd like to keep it that way, and make sure that the city's driving the issue, and we're kind of supporting however we can.
And the city rightfully is being just as cautious as the district is in making sure we make the right decision. The one thing that I've gotten there's been no hesitancy on though is the one fee, one plan. I'm going to be making a report to the full council, first meeting in January, and expect direction from them at that point. But I've kept them briefed on this the whole way. And their end goal is the same as the water districts, and that is to do what's best for our ratepayers and for our citizens.
That was it then?
On the habitat, yeah.
We had one,
Yeah, David Baldwick, couple things. On the fee, our understanding, or my understanding from reading, that NRS limits it to $550 an acre for habitat plans. You say the county fees anticipated to go up, are they going to the legislature to get that changed?
I would assume.
But you don't know of any
I don't know of any pending legislation.
pending action
Right.
on that. And also, we're talking about, and Bo brought this up at a workshop and stuff, but as the water district becomes an agent of the city, is that a formal recognition by Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah, I had that conversation with Fish and Wildlife, because I asked specifically, because in a memo we got from the county, they had basically said, yes, it's possible for you to do your own plan, but you need to be aware if people do business with the water district, that there'll be an additional fee. So I kind of honed in on that and said, wait a minute, we're after one plan, one fee. Is there any reason under the plan we have in Virgin Valley it will not cover everybody? And they said, no, there's no reason. I think what they were talking about in that memo is the fact that that's the way it exists today.
Right.
But there's no reason through likely interlocal agreement that we can't work that out between the entities, the city and the water district.
Bunkerville's gonna be the.
Yeah, and again, that's an issue that will be,
Question.
my last conversation with Mike San, I said, I'll have official direction from the city here in the beginning of January. I said, we need to get in the room mid-January, and we need to start hammering this stuff out. And that'll be one of the issues that's on the table to see how that'll impact. But I think there are options there. So I haven't really looked at that. It's an issue, not a barrier.
Right.
I think there are options there that are gonna serve Bunkerville really well. So, hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
okay, then I guess you want to move on to our legislative.
Charter change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Warren Hardy with the Hardy Consulting Group. I was asked to pursue the concept or the idea, find out where barriers might be with regard to doing a charter change to have all of the members of the board elected by the residents. There was a specific concern about whether we were impacted by one man, one vote in doing that. I asked that question through Assemblyman Hardy of the Legislative Council Bureau, who is considered the authority, although the courts are always the final, decider of these issues. The best place you can go other than the court for these kind of questions is the Legislative Council Bureau. I did receive a verbal opinion on that. I'm expecting I've asked for a written opinion so we can have it in our files, but I did get a verbal opinion from the Legislative Council Bureau that is twofold, actually, were covered twice. The first is that the one man, one vote does not apply to special districts like the Virgin Valley Water District. So there's no difficulty arranging the board however we see fit in statute. The second answer to the question was, even if it did apply, it doesn't, what we're proposing to do doesn't violate one man, one vote. Because one man, one vote allows for demographic requirements, geographic requirements. So you can say, under one man, one vote, Bunkerville gets 2 seats, Mesquite gets 3. Then for Bunkerville, for the 2 seats in Bunkerville, as I understand it, the 3 seats in Mesquite, one man, one vote then applies.
Well,
You can't have one person.
The charter, I think, says south of the river.
Right, which is what she suggested we do. We don't call out Bunkerville, but we
yeah.
say south of the river. So she says, she believes there's significant case law in both cases that we're covered to do that. I understood the direction of the board to want to move forward on that. I had to take the liberty of asking for a bill draft to be submitted because we were up against the deadline. Ideally, I would have liked to have come before the board for final approval to do that, but that can always be withdrawn should the board decide to go in a different direction. But I have asked for a bill draft through Assemblyman Hardy. It has been submitted. So as it stands today, we'll have legislation, unless I'm told otherwise, we will have legislation to make that charter change. And I submitted the draft that was given to me by Mr. Bingham to LCB as the language we would like to have in that bill. There's still sufficient time to make changes if we decide that we want to make those changes to the final language, but the bill's been
So
submitted.
basically what you're saying is we need to put this on the agenda, the next agenda for a vote.
We have some time, I mean, it's there. We have really till probably the 1st of February, middle of February to withdraw the legislation if we decide. But the sooner the better, because I don't want to waste LCB's time in drafting a bill that we're going to decide not to go forward with.
Well, and I read your thing where you talk about you want everybody to be on board and everybody. I think the city of Mesquite's had a meeting about it. We had a public discussion about it. I think everybody's on board, so I don't know of any dissension to what's proposed, so.
And just if I may, Mr. Chairman, address what Member Woller's talking about in the memo. I did indicate what I just said in terms of the opinion of the Legislative Council Bureau. I want to restate that as a verbal opinion at this point. It's pretty clear to me. I'd be happy to share the email with anybody who's interested. But I also did reiterate in that memo that from a logistical, reputation perspective, I don't want to take anything to the legislature that there's not broad community support for. I also indicated that I am comfortable, just from my experience, with what the Water District and the city has done in terms of public outreach and having public meetings and having input on that issue. I have no heartburn going forward with that as long as there's a majority of the city council and the Water District that agree with that.
I believe you did make one statement in your letter here in regards to them actually giving you that in writing, to make sure that we do have that in writing.
Yes, I've requested that. That is, unfortunately, this is the busiest time
Yeah.
in the world for the Legislative Council Bureau, and in her mind, it's so clear, the answer is so clear. I'll just, so we have that as an interim step, I'll forward that to the general manager and our council. I'll forward that email, so we at least have that, because there was no hesitancy in her email at all.
Yeah, it sounded pretty.
And we will have that in our possession before we go to the legislature with it.
And we need to have agendized this again. I mean, we've already approved it, haven't we?
I would leave
No,
that
I
to-
think what we approved was, what, if I'm not incorrect, is that we approved it to go forward to the legislative, what did you call it? The
Legislative Council Bureau.
Council Bureau, and make sure that we're, that they felt like we were in conformity with the one man, one vote rule. Having come back and they indicated it was so, I think that now we have to agendize it and vote on it, if I'm not mistaken.
I'd have to go back and look exactly at the motion. We did, in addition to advising warrant to go up there, we actually, the board approved specific language, so I can't remember exactly what the motion says relative to going forward, if the word comes back, yes, everything's okay, but we'll take a look at it, if we need to agendize it, we'll get it
Okay.
on a agenda, then the next one, maybe the one after.
Thank you.
Right. Sound like a lot of hard work. You have a comment?
Well, just a reminder to the board, you can make resolutions, give assignments, or take other actions if you want to, as part of this agenda item, for the staff, which I think we already have direction, or to Mr.
Yeah, I think.
If you want to say,
Good job, Warren.
go Warren, do something, or if he feels like he has.
Looks like he's done it. No, I,
We'll continue then these conversations with the county and with, Fish and Wildlife on the habitat plan, and if we hit any bumps in the road, we'll be back here to talk to you about it. If not, I hope, I asked Mr. Sen today about a time frame once the community is completely on board, of course, once we have the authorization of the city council as well, because as Member Bowler points out, they're kind of, this is their issue. And he thought this could be resolved completely in a 6-month time period, which I think we'd all be delighted with.
I think we almost now have to wait for the final approval of the city council before we can move any further. But, that's coming up on the next meeting, so should be done, but I think it all kind of hinges on that. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.